Good Wednesday evening, everyone. You are watching Maryland GOP's Direct Line Show. Today, our special guest, our next governor of the great state of Maryland, Dan Cox from Frederick County, Maryland. Welcome to the show, Dan Cox. Our hosts tonight are Mark Hungerford and Nicole Bennett. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Dwight.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the show, Nicole and Dan. Dan, you've undoubtedly had a long day today. Where have you been going? Where have you been campaigning lately?
Well, we're hitting the I-95 corridor with everything we have. And so we had a couple stops, one of which was Annapolis, and just wound our way back here. So it's exciting. We see a lot of parents engaged this time because of the schooling issues for a variety of reasons. But it's neat to see people kind of taking part in their politics and making sure that they get involved. It's going to be an interesting and a great turnout, I believe, this fall.
Great. Well, I think there really was a vote for both the Democratic primary and the Republican primary did not have business as usual. And that's a sentiment that you see across the state. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it demonstrates that people are yearning and crying out for our leadership to kind of focus on the practical things, the things that we all know that need to be focused on. And the Republican vision carries that flag the best. I mean, we have the vision that says, that it's about our children. It's about making sure our schools are world-class, that we have a focus on academics and not on political indoctrination of any kind, which includes this, this whole difficult but yet very hot subject of girls having to compete against boys in their sports. And we see that this is now being litigated at the Supreme Court. I'm expecting that we might hear something soon. I think it's this session. So it's it's an interesting time on that front, but certainly parents are crying out for leadership because they're shocked at what they're seeing in their public schools. And then you add to that the economic situation. I mean, we're seeing people literally, Mark and Nicole, I just was speaking with a senior citizen at this church this morning that we were at, South Annapolis, and she literally grabbed my arm and started choking up, and she said, "Just don't forget us as seniors." I said, "No, ma'am, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to make sure we remember you." And she said, "Because," so I let her finish, and she said, "Because 3 of my friends in the senior community were just evicted this week because they could not afford their rents." So this is a crisis. The economic situation has got to be dealt with. Republicans have the vision of putting money more back in the pockets of the consumer, of the individual, of the citizen. It's our money, it's your money, and that's what we're doing. Our campaign is about that, lowering our property taxes and making sure that this inflation is something that we get a handle on and lower it immediately. And then lastly, of course, the crime issue. That's our third major issue that we're seeing a crying out about. And when I say crying out, I'm talking about literal tears sometimes. I mean, I was in West Baltimore, and it's just shocking what's going on, both with the fentanyl and also the shootings, and it's got to end. We need real leadership. Republicans bring that to the table, and that's what we intend to do this fall.
That's a good segue into one of the big questions I have. I have an opportunity to travel the state on behalf of the state party. And what I've heard repeatedly, especially from Brown and Black communities, is that they want their police departments fully funded. None of this, we don't have money for policing for the communities that are most impacted. Where do you stand on that issue?
Absolutely. That's our platform. That's the Republican platform. That's what we've been talking about. In fact, in my committee, the Judiciary Committee, I was proud to join with my fellow Republicans and stand for the police. We defeated many different bad bills, very, very hard left bills attacking our police, trying to take away their pensions, trying to take away their qualified immunity entirely. And it was just very unfortunate that we saw very leftist groups show up in committee demanding that we defund the police. And yet, who showed up, Nicole? From Baltimore City asking that we fund the police. It was 9 Black pastors from very, difficult situations of the city that just were saying, look, we call for help and no one is able to show up because we're about 800 officers short. And we know this, Governor Hogan has made it clear that if the city does not get this in order, that he's more than happy to withhold funding if necessary to urge action. Now we see that Ivan Bates has been elected, and he has a very clear statement that he's going to take charge on this issue. So we hope to see this change quickly, and I'm on board to make that happen as well.
Now, of course, your opponent is Wes Moore, and one of the challenges of this race is that people seem to know him as a celebrity, and I put that in quotes, but they seem to know less about him on the issues. And so how do you articulate that the division, that difference that you have with the Democratic nominee?
Well, you know, it's like two different discussions. First of all, I'm not doubting that can be a nice guy to chat with. In fact, I don't doubt that at all. The issue is, first of all, trustworthiness on the front of his book, where he says there's 2 boys from Baltimore City. The problem is one of those boys was that he was saying was him, young man that did not grow up in Baltimore City. He's not from Baltimore City. And that really upsets Baltimore City folks. They're like, you know, this isn't nice. This isn't good. He also claims to have allowed to stand 3 times Bronze Star of Valor as being awarded him. He has not received a Bronze Star of Valor. A lot of veterans are upset with that, but that's on the trustworthy side. When you look at, and also, you know, obviously the issue of his economic background and his focus is expanding government. I mean, pure and simple, he wants to embrace the Washington, D.C. politics, and he wants to bring it right here to Maryland, and he wants to just overflow that dam that Governor Hogan's been holding back with that no tax on Maryland dam that we've all been blessed to have for 8 years. And yet he is all in for the Green New Deal. If you look at his website, he wants to ban gasoline cars. He's all in for that. In fact, his running mate co-sponsored that bill. And then you look at his crime policy. He has stated while Baltimore was burning that not only should we defund the police, this is salon.com, that we need to indict not only the individuals, and meaning the police, but also the system. Now, the problem with that is he's not talking about fixing things that are to improve the system. He's talking about eradicating entire processes within the government to have our police departments change, basically shift over to social work. He even goes on to say in that video, if you watch the salon.com video, you can YouTube it. He says he'd like to change the $500 million in the police budget in Baltimore City to shift a lot of that over to the social worker budget, which is only, he said, only $45 million. Well, I'm sorry, when we talk to social workers on the campaign trail, nobody feels safe going to an active crime scene without that police protection. We need more police officers to end the active and violent crime. That's a big difference between us. And so when we talk on the campaign trail, a lot of people don't know this. And the thing that I think gets people the most, Mark, is when I talk to the minority groups, minority majority communities, such as our Latino groups and the families of, I always talk about Viva la Familia, and they love the family. And, this is something that unites Republicans and Hispanics. And when they find out that these schools and that Wes Moore on his website is proclaiming that his goal is to centralize education, not expand school choice, but to centralize the power to then indoctrinate through the local school boards, forcing them the curriculum that does this gender ideology politics. I mean, they literally happening right now in California, where they are doing this behind parents' backs. I put a bill in to stop this. It was ridiculed and was not voted in, but yet 50,000 Maryland parents supported it. So I know this is a hot topic, but I tell you, it is a winning topic for Republicans. And Wes Moore is on the wrong side of history on that. He's against the parents, like we saw in Virginia, calling great parents domestic terrorists or whatever. And McAuliffe saying, this was the clincher. McAuliffe saying that parents should not be involved in their children's education. And yet it's happening right here in Maryland, and Wes Moore is on that same wrong side. And so we're pointing that out. Latinos are very concerned. Our minority populations, Asian Americans, they're all concerned about this. This is a big issue.
It's interesting the contrast you touch on, which is, of course, that Wes Moore in the Democrat primary and in general as well has benefited from the support of the teachers union.
Yeah,
very much was their candidate. And I assume we all should be worried that were he elected, he would be beholden to them and to their agenda, which is, I think, as you point out, not particularly parent friendly.
Yes, he is. And I think as Republicans, we can really rest in the fact that the people of Maryland are longing for leadership. They're longing to say, let's stop being beholden to these interests, these special interests. Let's start listening to the people. They want to have access to their government. They want to be able to stay here, retire here, live here. We all know this, we've heard it, and yet they want fighters. They want people in our party to stand up. I was in Baltimore City after an event and wanted to swing by one of the restaurants in Little Italy, and I met with one of the owners, Democrat all her life. Some of you may know her. And, she said, look, I'm going to vote for you under one condition. I said, what's that? She said, you actually do what the Republicans say they're going to do. But we're tired of politicians that promise one thing and then they get in office and they don't follow through on that. And I think that's what people are crying out for. They want to see that vision. They want to see that leadership, that we don't have international lobbyists and big international corporations controlling little Maryland small businesses. We see watermen having issues with international corporations trying to control the Chesapeake Bay. That's a big deal on the Eastern Shore. I mean, they're very afraid they're losing their businesses. In fact, I talked to one the other day. He literally sold his water business, his waterman business, crabbing and oystering, because he just could not compete. So as Republicans, we bring freedom and opportunity to our small businesses. And that obviously raises up the income and the job opportunities. This is what people really are looking for. They're asking for it. They're crying out for it. And as Republicans, I really believe that we have that winning spirit. As Ronald Reagan always talked about, the American spirit that would never die, that it's because big government needs to get out of the way. And if we as Republicans stand up for the little guy and stand up for the small businesses, 50% of our economy, we start leading in this way unashamedly and without fear against these candidates that come in like Wes Moore from really out of state, big money controlled. They don't really have the people at heart. And not only that, the policies are clearly in opposition to the everyday interests of the people of Maryland. So anyone who thinks that, well, we'll just have to go along to get along here and move with the Democrat status quo, not going to happen, folks. The Republican vision has got to win. We've got to carry the flag. And I think that we're seeing that, regardless of polls, I know for a fact that when you look at the substance of the polls and you look also when I'm on the trail, there is a groundswell of support, Mark and Nicole, for our party and our vision like never before, so long as we continue to uphold those values that we cherish and that we pledge to.
Agreed. Listen, speaking of being fearless, I have been kind of following a bit, and tell me all about this Morgan State debate that you had by yourself. Mr. Moore apparently was too busy to come to one of our state's HBCUs and talk to the very people that he swears up and down are 100% in his corner. How did that go?
Well, I could say that at 17 years of lawyering with my small business, it was a hot bench. And I had the choice to kind of recoil from it or just to go with the flow. And I just, was grateful I was able to mostly go with the flow, because people deserve to have their answers and they deserve to be able to have the access and the questions. And what was so exciting is afterwards, all the young people that came up to me and, just told me, wow, I was kind of not really leaning towards you, but now you have my vote because I can see you care, just everyday thing, people that realize that we as Republicans show up. We're not, out there ignoring the needs of our HBCUs and our everyday communities. And they just wanted that. And sadly, Wes Moore chose not to show up. And so, where was he? Well, I found out he was, I think, in Washington, from what I'm told, in Washington, D.C., raising millions of dollars or whatever he was able to raise. So he blew off an opportunity to reach out to really a college that has low income students, students that are working 2 and 3 jobs to get through, just like I did in college. And so I kind of identified with them. I got in there and I was like, I see what you're going through. You're getting your Pell Grant. And then you got to make that up, right? Well, that's where I was at Mount St. Mary's and at University of Maryland. I had to do the same exact thing. And it was really a good time. It was I would say 90% very positive and probably 10% super negative hot bench stuff. But at the end of the day, I think they really appreciated how that came off. And I'm hopeful that we can continue that dialogue going forward. So I have two more coming up this week, at least two, maybe three more forums.
So tell us about that. Whereabouts are those?
So tomorrow's the Federal Workers Forum, and this is the active retired. It's the largest union in Maryland, very left, mostly. Largest group of employed and unemployed, employed and retired workers in Maryland, and they are not happy. Once again, just like Morgan State, and by the way, the professor at Morgan State made a comment about this. She praised me. You probably saw that, and she was negative on that Westmore turned them down. But the same thing with the NARFE, I think they call it, the active and retired federal workers. They're not happy that Westmore turned them down. So I'll be there. I think there are several others that should be there. I think Barry Glassman did accept as well. So I think he's the only other Republican. So hopefully he won't feel like I'm crowding him out. I know he's running his independent race, and that's cool with me because I'm up and down the ballot R. If you're an R, you got my support.
For sure.
But then Tuesday, we have a disabilities forum, and this one is by Zoom only, but it looks to be less a debate and more of a forum. And I think Westmore is planning to appear at that one. But again, he tends to come to the ones that are Zooms, and he doesn't have to actually debate.
You know, you mentioned before some of the issues about energy policy and possibly banning cars. It's been this kind of, how shall I say, Moore strategy of, you know, put out the smiling face, but not talk about the issues or the agenda that they've got. And you're doing a great job of calling him out on some of the areas where he's pushing issues that, frankly, average Marylanders would not be happy with. Can you elaborate on some of the other areas where you think maybe Moore is getting a pass from the media? Because I think that's certainly one of the issues that's going on here, where people just don't know enough about what he's planning on doing if were he to win.
I think taxes. His economic package is so far left, there's no way to fund it. And having been in Annapolis, they're always looking for money. And the people that are supporting him that have put forth the packaging and the different proposals on his website, they write those proposals very much like the briefings that I've seen in Annapolis that were calling for expanded taxation, like you might recall where they were trying to tax the internet, where they tried to expand a variety of taxes. And thankfully, we stopped most of those, and Governor Hogan stood against them. But I think they're going to go for a reenactment of greater taxes to pay for this, because right now the surplus funds are there, but they're projected out because of Kerwin. So I think, as well as some other obligations we have, and I think you're going to see he's totally getting a pass on this. They're not asking a thing about his economic package. They're not asking him how he's going to pay for it. They're not asking him how he's going to provide immediate affordable housing relief. I am talking about this. I actually say, well, I have a plan, and it's called lowering your property tax assessment valuation so that you can then pass that on to the tenants. Because the only reason why tenants went this past month, or July 1 or August 1, depending, the rents went up to 34%, was because the assessment valuation process used the inflation index across all the counties, especially in Baltimore City, which has double the rate of most other counties. So now all of a sudden I'm getting emails from independent voters and some Democrats that are going to vote for me, they say, but they're literally saying, but we don't know if we're going to be in our apartment by the time the election comes. It's that desperate. The growing, and I'm talking about this, the number one homeless person, the fastest growing homeless person in America is a single mom with a job. So that's a huge issue. And if you look at the Washington Post poll that claims that Wes is doing well over me, if you look at it and look at their economic, the number one issue on everyone's hearts and minds right now is the economic disaster happening, the inflationary crush. And when they ask all of those individuals in the poll, who are you going to vote for? They didn't say, who would you like to vote for? Who are you leaning towards? They said, have you decided who you're going to vote for? 50% said Dan Cox, 39% said Wes Moore. So this is the underling that they don't, this is the undercurrent that they don't want anybody to know. So I'm just fine with Wes Moore not explaining himself and going along and riding the ride. But I hope to nail him on this as soon as we can. And we've got a plan. We've got ads going up. And so hopefully, and we're going to have a press conference as well about the economy. So stay tuned for that. We will definitely keep the party in the loop on all of that.
Let me go back to what you were saying about the poll. So you're saying that among voters, may interpret it the right way, but among voters who have decided, they're more likely to have decided for you.
Yeah, so if you read the Washington Post poll, which claims to be decidedly for Wes Moore,
Right.
It's inaccurate in the sense that it's a push poll. If you look at it, I mean, my campaign manager literally burst out laughing when he read it. And I'm the same way. I mean, I have a poli-sci undergrad degree, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, yeah, we could play with this any way we want. But what I liked about it was when I read through the specific questions on the issues, and that's what our campaign is. You know, that's what the Republican flag is, our values. It's just like what Newt Gingrich did. Our contract with Maryland are very clear issues of freedom that we're going to make sure that we perform. And so when we talk about the economy, number one issue of that subset group of everyone who said that the economy was their number one issue, which is, it's already the highest rated issue. So of those numbers, whatever it was, a couple hundred people, they asked those people only, well, have you made up your mind who you're voting for? And they said, yes. 50% said Dan Cox, 39% Wes Moore. So that's an indicator what's coming. And I think that's why you see every other day some kind of negativity about me, because they're nervous.
Well, and that's why they keep wanting to talk about other issues rather than the issues in which people, as you've talked about already, the different groups you've been meeting with, the issues that really are front and center on people's mind are the challenges with the economy, isn't it?
Yeah. As we head into the winter season, and as you know, Dan, I live here in Southern Maryland. One of the things that has been heavy on the minds of the people who live in my area, many of whom have oil heat. You know, you have the big oil tank on the back of the house, or some people have propane. Several hundred gallons you're going to have to purchase. You know, if you have, let's say, a 300, 400 gallon tank, you're probably going to have to fill that up 3 times over the winter. And as someone who works for a living, you know, it's a pinch. It's a pinch. But imagine yourself being on a fixed income, being a senior. Last year, we had this similar situation with older people not being able to have home heating fuel, but instead opting for electric blankets to try to keep themselves warm, and the damages that happen in their home. You know, when we talk about kitchen table issues, and I know it's important to people across the board, what do you say to those seniors that gives them a sense of Dan to the rescue? Dan's on the way. We have a plan to protect our way of life. Can you speak to that point?
Absolutely, yes. First of all, I give them hope and encouragement to say that under Governor Hogan's bill and approach this year, we as Republicans passed the first senior tax reduction in many, many years. Now that was a start. It only went up to $1,750. And so we understand that barely catches up with some inflation. But that's a pattern that's already in law now. And so I intend to take immediate action to continue that legacy, to advance our opportunities for seniors to stay here through both tax credits and tax cuts, pushing for that in the legislature, and really embarrassing the legislature to take action on this quickly.
Absolutely.
Just like we did with the fuel crisis. You know, we all remember that, and they finally did the moratorium. Well, we have to continue this effort because we are winning on that. Republicans have the message, and the Democrats know that, you know, people are losing. Look, you know, they literally can't, like you mentioned, buy the heating bill for their oil heat. And I also then say, vision casting, this is how we're going to end the moratorium on our natural resources. And a lot of people don't understand that we are smart enough to keep things clean energy, and access everything that we pay for in other states. We can access with clean energy and clean access and proper environmental techniques without burdensome, without 2-year permits, but immediate action to access the resources we have here, which, by the way, a lot of people don't know this, but we have more oil under Maryland than Saudi Arabia. And so this is something that we need to work on as Republicans until we win. We have to win on this. The moratorium has to be pushed back. Look, I was in Western Maryland, looking across to West Virginia, and they had those windmills, about 100 of them up on a ridge over. So Pennsylvania side had the windmills coming across to Maryland, and they shut down the Hagerstown plant for the electric plant because it was, coal feeds the plant. And so they didn't want that. So they wanted to switch it over to the windmills. Well, the problem is the windmills were not producing enough, that 40% extra energy. The windmills couldn't make it up. They kill birds and they'd give you a little bit, but that it wasn't doing the job. So we end up buying that 40%. We increased the West Virginia coal plant, or the electric plant with the coal-based electric, by 40%. And now we buy into Maryland from that plant. That's just nonsensical. And when I explain it to people, and then also tell them about how pristine and environmentally conscious these groups are out there. Why? Because this is their land. So when I was touring these areas, I saw more wildlife, wild turkeys running around, deer. We got videos and pictures because it was kind of neat. They were not too far from us. They really do care about the environment in these areas and these farms and in these these different mines. And they do believe that when you look at the different opportunities we have in Maryland with very resourceful, careful, clean access to get this oil and gas, we are going to have a new birth of energy opportunity here in Maryland that will really fuel the economy, drive down those costs that our seniors are experiencing, that everyone's experiencing, and really make us I believe the vision for Maryland in this regard is to make us one of the most prosperous states on the East Coast.
That's really the all of the above approach to energy, both
Absolutely
getting it from multiple sources, but also as a way of keeping the costs down and where people can afford. And Maryland really could contribute to that, couldn't it?
I believe so. And you look at where we're buying, our natural gas is 100% clean when we have to buy it across the border. It just racks up the bills. And yet if we were to have a competition option, it would drive down those costs, just like our healthcare, which is another aspect of, our citizens need to have better healthcare. I don't know. I'm sure you saw the recent news that the healthcare, the Obama exchange here in Maryland is skyrocketing now. And we need to fix that. And the way I think is to do the same thing, kind of open up
competition works every time.
Bring it across state lines as long as it's in compliance, and I think it'll be good.
Well, that has always been one of the challenges of Maryland is the legislature keeps adding benefits and requirements, and that could be a good thing if that's what you're interested in, but then there's a price tag associated with that, and that ends up making things that much more unaffordable and gives people less of an opportunity to choose what's really important to them.
Exactly. And that's why I think we as Republicans can vision cast with opt-in or opt-out. If you start allowing the citizens to make decisions on some of these packages, for instance, that'll open up the insurance sales industry, and they'll be able to have better competition because they'll be able to say, well, look, you can create your own package with less restrictions that Maryland requires. And I'm all in for that, because you look across the border, like Illinois does this. That's a blue state. So I think we can get there.
One of the issues we haven't had a chance to talk about so far is on transportation. As you drive around the state, I think you know that cars are the way most people get around. Talk about the difference between you and Westmore on those issues.
Well, he'd rather us sit in traffic and then not be able to charge our cars because we run out of battery. It is really a concern. In Maryland, obviously, we all know this. We sit in traffic so long, and it's a multi approach that I think we need to have. I think that the governor's approach to expand our lanes is something we've all been fighting for. I remember hearing about it when I was a kid, Mark. I literally heard my dad and another friend discussing the fact that there was this big debate about widening I-270 and I-495. Well, here we are.
Still having the same debate.
40 years later, having the same debate, and I-270 is just as it has been pretty much. I was there when the governor opened the additional lanes down on I-270 for the initial start of things. I supported that, and we have got to expand that quickly. I mean, I understand that some communities may want to have less building. They're concerned they're going to have a skyrocketing of building because of better roads, but I don't see that as the serious issue. The serious issue is the people that are sitting in traffic right now need more lanes because they're already there. And if you have a zoning issue and you want to make smart growth, that's your focus in a zoning capacity, but that doesn't change the capacity needed on the highways. And we already have these. I've been talking about this since I ran against Jamie Raskin, and as a state delegate for 4 years, I've joined in with this support to say we already have the easements. The federal and the state right-of-ways are already there on these highways, and so we just need to get it done. We need to stop the studies. There's always it seems to be another study that has to be done, and I think that's why we need another president in the White House in 2024, because I think we'll have a lot easier work to do on some of these issues. But I would like to see it move in the right direction. I'm hopeful that we can get there quickly before 2024. When you look at the federal transportation funds that come into Maryland, and you look at the fact that some of this is just a negotiation issue in terms of how fast you get your permits. This is what I do for a living for 17 years. I do a lot of business law practice. I do a lot of negotiation. 95% of my cases settle because I really believe in, trying to make it work. Let's find the way forward that's practical, and let's get it done, because people need to be able to move about. I'm not so hot on forcing everybody in the toll lane. So I like the governor's approach where he's not going to put tolls on the existing lanes and any additional lanes. I think we need to have as options to have for every new lane, if it's going to be a toll, you should have two, or at least a reverse from time. And I'm not so much, I certainly want to make sure we don't have toll lanes that are crushing like in Northern Virginia. So that's the only thing I would be looking carefully at, but we've got to get it done. We have to get these lanes in. So, and people understand this. People that go to work every day know that it's going to benefit their lives. And so I'm looking forward to working on that, and also the bridge projects, our infrastructure.
I absolutely agree with you on transportation. I live in one part of the state. I work in another part of the state. In my community, our greatest export is talent. Everybody gets up, break of dawn, and sometimes before that, and we travel to points north of here to work. It runs into the coming home traffic and that evening rush hour, the impact it actually has on your family.
Yes.
It's a much bigger impact than someone being concerned about maybe a mixed use housing development that may pop up in their home. When you talk about young people being at home by themselves because their parents are stuck in traffic an additional hour without parental guidance, all of those things, not being there for bath time, homework, after school pickups, it impacts your family life. And I think one of the smart things that we found out during COVID is that children actually do need their parents. I mean, we need to make money. Maryland is a very expensive state to live, make no mistake, but there is no discounting the connection between parent and child. And I think our Board of Educations are seeing the pushback on that. I know that a lot of our Board of Education candidates are absolute supporters of yours, but do you have any feelings about the way that those Board of Education races are looking? What can you do as governor to ensure that the Board of Educations, so-called Board of Educations across the state, are doing the best for the children, their very best?
Well, you're absolutely right. Downtime on the roads is really hurting everyone. And the interesting fact about our school system and our boards of education is that most counties have the Board of Education budget at more than 50% of their entire budget. It shows you the importance that this effort is to make sure that we have good conservative Republican voices and parents' voices, on the boards.
Sure.
So I'm supporting all of our Republican candidates up and down the board, all through the state, from Harford County, Cecil County, all the way down through Southern Maryland. And we need to get our good Republican and conservative parents elected. What I can do as governor is similar to what Governor Hogan has begun, and that is to carry that ball forward. He has several appointments on there that are parent friendly. We're going to make that the status quo now. We're going to make sure that Maryland has a state board of education and this new Kerwin super board, which I opposed because I saw it as a debacle, as did most Republicans. But now it's there. And so the governor has a role to appoint the individuals that are going to help control that influence on the local boards. We have to have our localities protected. We have to have our parents and our local education protected. And the way to do that, I think, in the state context is to make sure our appointments will respect that process. Right now, the Kerwin Super Board, this Kerwin board has it's called an administrative review. And one of their purposes is to potentially withhold funding directly from schools, a particular school. That's not good. It's a very concerning situation. So if we have, parents from, that have their kids in some of these schools on that board, I think there'll be a much greater voice. Additionally, I think when you look at the policies, parents are very, like I mentioned at the beginning, they're up in arms over the new regulations that some of the local boards have issued, such as Montgomery County and Howard County. And those regulations are concerning for a variety of reasons, but primarily because of the explicit sexual content as young kindergarten. I mean, we're talking about drag queen story hour type stuff that is, going to be advanced. And it's not what parents are looking at. It's not what they want. They don't want to have their kids focused on sexualization from K through third and all this. I mean, health class, sure, they can talk about appropriate topics in health class, not re-engineering your gender with 36 genders, but instead focusing on the appropriate aspects that we all know need to be talked about in high school or middle school at the appropriate age. But that's not what's going on. And parents are very much concerned, shocked. The number one issue that I have on the campaign trail, regardless of party, it's very surprising to me. And I knew, as a parent, I knew this would be a concern, but I didn't know it would really awaken this many. So I'm grateful for that. I only hope that everyone gets out and votes and they vote, because as we see, the thing that bothers me so much is at the end of the day, when the election comes, so many times the teachers union controls it. It's the Apple ballot. How do we overcome that as Republicans? And I think we overcome it through education. We overcome it through connecting the parents that that cast those ballots, and through the teachers. That's why I voted for teacher raises. I did not vote for Kerwin, but I did vote for the accompanying teacher raise package because I wanted teachers to get the money that they need. I know we already pay them pretty well in Maryland in many respects, but they could need to keep up with the inflation. So I felt it was an appropriate percentage increase. But at the end of the day, if you have teachers not getting the resources they need, and then always being blamed, we're not going to have the quality of education we need, and the parents aren't going to be involved to the level that they need to be involved in. And with an administration that's pushing the agenda, we need to back our teachers that just say no. Let's get back to reading, writing, arithmetic, STEM technologies. Let's make science and experimentation fun in terms of all of the opportunities that we have now. I mean, there is literally, in fact, I've had the privilege of serving in education for 10 years before I was an attorney, and the difference between 20 some years ago and now is amazing what you can access on the internet. And I mean, I have a 5-year-old that is homeschooled, and DIY Sci is his favorite channel thing. He loves watching this. And I think we need to do that across the state. And when you give kids vision, then they have a real purpose and focus in life, and they will better themselves.
It struck me that one of the things, as we talked a whole bunch of the major issues that people care about, is a kind of theme of populism, where whether it's the teachers union, whether it's on energy policy, or just go down on crime issues and in the whole defund the police effort. of of people of the sort of who are supporting Westmore have an agenda, which when you flesh it out for people, when people get to hear it,
Right.
that's not what resonates, and there's really deep concern. And it does seem that that's one of the great challenges that you have in this race is
Right.
to be able to tap into that populist response to some of these issues that frankly at a very elite group of people think are important, but which average people really don't care about.
Exactly. And, that's what we're focused on. That's what we focused on the primary. We're doing it again in the general. It's, it would be my dream to be able to wave a magic wand and have Westmore's $8 million that he spent, but I could have spent it better, I think. But anyway,
I'm sure you could have, because you're a good Republican, right?
well, yeah, absolutely, very fiscally. I try to drive home every night on the campaign trail, unless I'm in Ocean City or something, and I just can't make it back. But we do our best. But at the end of the day, reaching folks, it takes effort, work, and very careful and outside the box thinking. And so we're doing that. We're getting the message out. And that's why one of the things I ask is for everyone who believes in these things, and I tell all the moms this, and all the Papa Bears, Mama Bears, whatever you want to call them, and all the party activists too. It's so important that we help the down ballots, because the down ballot, a rising tide raises all boats. And that's our goal as we're running forward, is that we go up and down the ballot and we say, look, this is our moment. We may not have a better climate in the next 2 to 4 years. And if we want to see change while our kids are growing up, this is probably that moment, and we have to get engaged. We have to encourage others to get engaged. And so every person that tells me, well, you got my vote, my answer to that is, thank you. Now, I need you to go get 10 of your friends to vote, not only for me, but for all of these Republican freedom candidates. The whole Republican ticket has got to defend us in Maryland, or else we're going to have a uniparty that comes in and controls. And that's not going to be good for us. We're going to see taxes go up. We're going to see a flood of people leaving the state. And we are going to have, unfortunately, an economic downturn worse than we would otherwise. And so we can change that. We can make sure that we keep this state beautiful, and we can live here, work here, have our business here, have our kids here, and hopefully keep those businesses and opportunities, those jobs for our kids to stay here, and attract them to stay and have that enjoyment of our beautiful ocean, bay, our mountains, and then we can then retire here and enjoy our grandkids. All right. And that's my selfish little goal too. So that's the focus, but that's the path of freedom. There is no other. That's why Republicans are successful. Why? Because we're the ones that are carrying this banner. We can't let that banner fall, because at the end of the day, the AOCs on the left, they're taking such inroads into their party that we're not going to be able to understand or discern the future of America if we don't hold it steady. So that's what we're working on.
So as a final word, can you help us out? Just tell people how they can help you, how they can get in touch with the campaign, how they can contribute, how they can get a sign like that sign that you have behind you.
Yeah, so you can go to coxforfreedom.com. It's a great little moniker, and we on that page you can donate securely. You can sign up. There's a button called Get Involved. You can get a sign. You can join our teams. We have a program that my campaign is paying for and helping all campaigns that join us, called I-360. I know the party has its own program also, but our program, we have over close to 2,000 volunteers right now. We're dialing. We're getting people both the preparation for the get out the vote, because obviously, as we know, the votes are already being cast, the ballots have been sent, but also, just to make sure that our local candidates are not forgotten. We've got down ballots encouragement. We're making sure that everybody is involved that wants to be involved. And then hopefully, and if there's, continued opportunities going forward, we're going to have the joint efforts with different candidates for door knocking, as we've been doing. And that's very effective. But, interestingly, we're seeing our statistical rate be almost double with the I-360 app in terms of positive response. And you've probably seen that as well. So there's various ways that people can get involved, but it's urgent. It's now. There's 30 few days left. till November 8th. We have got to take action. And so I would urge and encourage everyone watching this and anyone else interested, if you can go out, get 10 people, join you. You can do postcard parties if you don't like to talk to people on the phone, or if you don't like to knock on doors. So there's so many different things you can do. Now's the time. We've got to make this happen and make it work. And we've got to win. We've got to win for everybody. We've got to win for our kids. We've got to win for the future of Maryland. Our children are worth far more. They're priceless, and we have got to stand up for them. And it's worth the next 30 days, 35 days or so. It's worth it. Whatever financial or whatever other sacrifice we make, this is our moment. And we can once again make Maryland what we know that we love it to be, and hold that line.
Well, thank you, Dan. We really appreciate you taking the time to be on Direct Line with us, and appreciate the message that you're bringing. And hopefully people will take up that last piece of advice as to how they can get involved. Nicole, you have the last word.
Wow. Thanks, Mark, for letting me have the last word. I appreciate it. Dan, I really, really wish you well. I want the very best for the state of Maryland. I know definitively that you are out here working hard. You've got teams out here knocking doors, making phone calls. That's how you win elections. Your ground game has been impressive, and I expect nothing less moving forward, party official wise. As just a regular old Marylander, thank you for wanting to save us from these taxes that we know are going to be coming our way if the other side has their way. This state will be hard to live in. Thank you for your sacrifice. We really appreciate it. We do.
It means a lot. Thank you both. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dwight. God bless. Let's go win.